Okay, so you're thinking about a career in, get this, international waste and scrap trading.
It's not the most glamorous field, I'll admit.
But honestly, I kind of think it's cool. It's like not your typical office job,
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
Someone's got to keep things moving, even if it's well.
Stuff people don't want to think about.
Exactly.
What I find really interesting is that this sector really sits at the crossroads of global trade and environmental responsibility.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle.
It really is.
And speaking of puzzles, we've actually got a career guide right here. And it really emphasizes that whole problem-solving angle.
Oh, yeah,
They're
absolutely.
looking for people who can think on their feet, handle curveballs, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. This is not your typical 9 to 5, that's for sure.
No kidding.
You're talking about navigating the complexities of customs regulations, international agreements. For instance, have you ever heard of the Basel Convention?
The Basel Convention.
Yeah.
Rings a bell, but I'd need a refresher.
Basically, it's a global treaty all about controlling the movement of hazardous waste across borders. It's all about making sure that these materials are handled responsibly at every single stage.
Okay, so like if I'm picturing this right, you're not just shuffling papers. You're making sure that, say, my old phone, when it finally bites the dust, gets recycled properly.
Exactly. You become this crucial link in the global supply chain, ensuring these materials find new life instead of,
Turning into toxic sludge in a landfill somewhere.
pretty much.
Okay, so big picture stuff, but let's break it down to earth for a second. What does an import-export specialist in this world actually do? Like day to day, where do they even begin?
Well, you might find yourself starting as an import-export assistant, learning the ropes. From there, you could move up to coordinator, supervisor, and so on.
Okay, so you work your way up the ladder, but what does that actually look like in practice?
So let's say you land the entry-level import-export assistant gig. You're going to be helping with things like customs clearance, which is way more complicated than it sounds. You need to make sure all the documentation is perfect, that it meets the regulations of both the exporting and the importing countries.
Wow, so there's a lot of pressure there.
There is.
One tiny mistake
And a whole shipment could be delayed, yeah.
yikes. Okay, so you've paid your dues as an assistant, you've got the hang of things,
Yeah.
then you move up to import-export coordinator.
Exactly. Think of it like this. You're moving from the passenger seat to behind the wheel.
I like that analogy.
You're overseeing the whole operation, maybe even negotiating contracts, analyzing market data. You're calling the shots.
Okay, so no more backseat driving? You're the one in charge.
Yeah,
But I bet that comes with like 10 times the pressure.
right.
What happens when a shipment's delayed or a supplier isn't doing what they're supposed to?
Oh, absolutely. And that's why problem solving is so crucial in this line of work. You need to be able to think on your feet, come up with solutions when things inevitably go sideways.
So you're telling me that on top of like, I don't know, memorizing every import law ever, these import-export specialists also have to be like master problem solvers.
It's a demanding field, that's for sure.
That's a lot of hats to wear.
It is. But that's also what makes it so exciting,
Okay, so let's say our listeners thinking, challenge accepted.
I like their attitude.
What are some skills they should be working on if they're serious about this career?
Well, if you look at this career guide, one thing that really jumps out is communication skills.
All right, because you're dealing with people all over the world.
Exactly. Think about it. Suppliers, customers, government agencies, often in totally different time zones.
Oh man, can you imagine trying to wrangle a supplier at like 3:0 a.m. your time?
It's all part of the job. And it's not just about speaking different languages, although that certainly helps.
It's like understanding different cultures too. right?
Absolutely. Reading between the lines, building those relationships, that's huge in this field.
Totally. Okay, so we've got the people skills covered.
Mm-hmm.
What about the like technical side of things? We were talking about multimodal logistics earlier.
Yes.
That still sounds kind of intimidating, to be honest.
Well, think of it this way.
Okay.
You're basically like the conductor of an orchestra, but instead of musical instruments.
You're dealing with mountains of trash.
Well, not trash exactly, more like valuable resources waiting to be reborn.
Okay, I like how you put that.
But you get the idea. You need to understand how to use different modes of transportation, ships, trains, trucks, even planes sometimes, to get these materials where they need to go.
So you need to know the pros and cons of each method.
Yep, and how to coordinate everything, make sure it's cost-effective, and of course that it arrives on time.
So this isn't just about paperwork. We're talking about like actual cargo ships out on the open ocean.
Oh, yeah, this is real-world stuff. And it all ties into this idea of a circular economy.
Right, because we can't talk about waste and scrap without talking about sustainability.
Exactly.
For those of us who might not be totally up on the lingo, what does a circular economy actually look like in this context?
So basically, it's about moving away from that old take, make, dispose model that we're all used to.
Okay, so less waste.
Way less. It's about seeing waste as a resource. In this industry, that means making sure materials get recycled and reused as much as possible. Ideally, you want to create a closed loop system.
So less stuff ending up in landfills, more stuff getting a second life.
Exactly. It's about minimizing waste, reducing our reliance on extracting virgin resources. It's about making sure we're using our planet's resources responsibly.
It sounds like this career path isn't just about spreadsheets and shipping routes. It's about actually contributing to a bigger goal, you know, making the world a little bit better.
That's a big part of the appeal for a lot of people in this field.
Yeah.
Knowing that you're making a difference.
Now, you mentioned earlier that the career guide also had some actual interview questions. What kind of curveballs should someone expect if they're prepping for an interview in this world?
Well, they're definitely not going to ask you about your favorite color. Be ready for questions that really put your knowledge to the test.
Okay, so like what? Give me an example.
Let's say you've got a shipment of recycled plastic stuck in customs because of some documentation problems. How do you handle it?
Oh, wow. So they're really trying to see how you think on your feed.
Exactly.
What else might they throw at you?
They might grill you on specific environmental regulations, like that Basel Convention we talked about,
Hmm.
or they could give you a hypothetical scenario, a supplier dispute, maybe a sudden change in import tariffs, and see how you'd navigate it.
It's like they're throwing you right to the deep end.
Exactly. They want to see if you can swim.
Okay, so let's say our listener aces those interview questions, lands the job. What's next? What's the career trajectory look like?
Well, we talked about the typical path assistant, coordinator, manager, but what's really exciting about this field is there's still so much room for growth. Like, this whole sector is evolving so quickly.
It's kind of like the Wild West out there.
In a way, yeah. As more and more companies prioritize sustainability, the demand for people with these specialized skills is only going to skyrocket.
So there's a real chance to like make your mark on the world.
Absolutely. You could
Yeah.
even end up shaping the future of the entire industry.
Now that's pretty cool. But okay, let's get down to brass tacks. What does a typical day look like for an import-export specialist in this world? Is there even such a thing as typical?
That's a thing. Every day is different, but one thing's for sure, you're going to be doing a lot of communicating.
Emails, phone calls, the whole 9 yards.
Oh, yeah. And video conferencing. Gotta love those different time zones.
So you could be like talking to a supplier in China while you're also finalizing a shipment to, I don't know, Brazil,
Exactly. It's a juggling act, for sure.
I bet. And in between all that, you're also up to your eyeballs in paperwork.
Oh, absolutely. Reviewing documents, processing orders, making sure every single thing is compliant with all those regulations.
There's that attention to detail again. But I imagine it's not all just logistics and paperwork. There's got to be a human element to this job too, right?
100%. Building strong relationships is key in this field. You're going to be working closely with suppliers, customers, even competitors sometimes.
It's all about collaboration.
Exactly. And remember, this is a global industry. So you need to be culturally sensitive, a good diplomat. Those skills are super important.
It's about finding that balance, right? Between the technical side of things and the human side.
You got it. It's a people business, even when you're dealing with, well,
Stuff that most people don't want to think about.
you said it.
Okay, so before we wrap up here, any final words of wisdom for someone who's thinking, this sounds like my kind of challenge?
I'd say, first of all, do your research. This isn't a career you just fall into. Network, learn as much as you can about the industry, and don't be afraid to get your hands dirty, literally.
Love that. Get out there in the trenches.
Exactly. Internships are super valuable, even if they're unpaid. And any experience you can get in logistics, international trade, environmental management, it'll all serve you well.
Awesome advice. Well, there you have it. Becoming an import-export specialist in this world. It's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. It's demanding, it's complex, it's always changing. But for the right person, someone who thrives on challenge, who's passionate about sustainability, it's an incredibly rewarding path.
Who knows, maybe you'll be the one to invent a new recycling technology or negotiate some groundbreaking international agreement.
Now there's a thought. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of international waste and scrap. It's a field that often flies under the radar, but it plays such a vital role in creating a more sustainable future. Until next time, keep exploring, Keep learning, and remember, one person's trash is another person's treasure.